It's my great pleasure to welcome you to tonight's Kay and Britt Rice lecture series featuring the famed pollster, John Zogby. Given the fact that we're about a week away from a very major midterm election, I think we're very lucky to have John with us tonight, because John will tell us all about the political trends in the country, who's up, who's down, who's going to win, and who's going to lose, and why. No pressure, John. Before we start tonight's program, I have a few announcements to make. First of all, I'd like to thank Kay and Britt Rice for their continued support of the Library Center, and in particular of this program, and I'm delighted to see that you're both able to be here with us tonight. Thanks again. Our program tonight is being live cast on the web, so our web viewers, welcome to those of you who are watching tonight from your home computers. In addition, we have a very special treat, as you see on the screen in front here on the stage. We have an audience from the University of New England in Biddeford, Maine. You may ask, why do we have this live transmission from the University of New England? Well, Biddeford, Maine is not far from the summer home of the president in Kennebunkport, and over the years the president has established a very close working relationship with the university. Indeed, the university and the George Bush School and the George Bush Foundation are sponsoring a number of programs together. Just last month we had a simulcast of a speech that Brent Scowcroft delivered at the university, and it was broadcast here to the George Bush School. So we're delighted that they're able to join us tonight, and I hope they enjoy this featured speaker that we have tonight. And what I'd like to do right now is call upon the host at the University of New England to give a few words, and that is Professor Jacques Carter, who is the provost of the university. Jacques, before you start, I just want you to notice that I am wearing my lobster tie.
Well, thank you, Roman. We have lobster here too, actually, and it's on our plates most of the time, not on our shirts. But I want to thank you for inviting us again to participate in this live interactive lecture tonight. We're very excited. We have a whole room here full of students who are very interested in hearing the analysis that John Zogby will provide us with tonight. And of course, as you know, so goes Maine, so goes the nation. So we're very interested in hearing the results of tonight's polling discussion. Thank you.
Jacques, thank you very much. It's very good to have you and your students and other guests with us. Actually, that was a pretty good joke. We should take that on the road. John will speak for about 20 minutes to 30 minutes tonight, after which, as I've stated, we'll be able to take some questions. In terms of the format, I think we'll take the first two questions from our guests at UNE, then we'll turn to our audience here. John Zogby is a pollster, author, commentator, and chairman of the board of Zogby International, a worldwide research polling and marketing firm which he founded in 1984 and is based in Utica, New York. Mr. Zogby has gained a reputation for extremely accurate polling, which he attributes in part to his unique interactive polling methodology. His success has led to much acclaim and earned him nicknames such as the Prince of Pollsters and America's Pollmaster General. He is the author of The Way We'll Be, the Zogby Report on the Transformation of the American Dream, a New York Times bestseller. Mr. Zogby is an active board member of Sudan Sunrise, an organization founded by the late former NBA player Manute Bol that works to help war-torn Sudan heal after several years of internal conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in a warm Aggie welcome to John Zogby.
Wow, that's so nice. Thank you. Hello, Maine. How are you? It's always great to be here in liberal Texas. Kay and Britt Rice, thank you very much. Thanks for your support. Thanks for the program tonight. Roman, I'm the lucky one. I was here last year, and no one ever asks me to come back anywhere. And so this is really very, very nice. Jacques Carter, hello, how are you? Thanks for gathering. Thanks for requiring your students to come. I have no idea what's going to happen next Tuesday. Anybody who says doesn't know what he or she is talking about. But I'm going to take you on an odyssey over the next 18, 19 minutes to at least let you know the fascinating story of how I arrived at I don't know what's going to happen. Well, let me cut to the chase. Republicans are going to win substantially. They're going to win big in the House, although I'm not entirely sure about the majority in the House. I think it's not likely that they take over the Senate. That could happen, but let's save that for later. What happened? How did we get to where we are? 39% of likely voters tell us that they are angrier than they have ever been before at the political system. 23%, another 23%, tell us that they are more disappointed than they've ever been before. That's 62%, and that is conservative, moderate, and liberal, and that's substantial, and that's the mood that's driving the country. The difficulty is that on one hand, there's tremendous frustration and exasperation with the President of the United States and with his party. On the other hand, and pay close attention because as a pollster, I will have 3 or 4 hands during the course of this conversation. But on the other hand, there is very little love nationwide for the Republican Party. That's what makes my life very, very interesting. We did a poll for the Blue Dog Democrats a couple of weeks ago. We polled 1,000 independent voters nationwide. Real in-depth look at independents and who they are and how they feel. They told us, 13% told us that they give a positive job performance rating to the Democrats in Congress. 13%. 5% told us that they give a positive job performance rating to the Republicans in Congress. Let me give you a context here. I used to poll for the New York Post, and a front page story way back in 1995, U.S. voters give O.J. Simpson a 16% positive rating. You see how difficult this is to assess. Here's what happened. 2 years ago, voters went to the polls in record numbers. And they had been telling us for 2 solid years that they wanted 3 things. Since our first polling after the 2006 elections right through to November 5th of 2008. They said, number 1, they wanted change. But they never achieved anywhere near a consensus on the direction of that change. And so when we try to drill down on the specific issues, budgets and deficits and taxes and Social Security and war and peace and so on, the country was split. But still the consensus was that voters wanted change. Number 2, they said they wanted a problem solver. That was the number 1 thing they were looking for in the next president of the United States. Someone to solve problems. And thirdly, they were looking for a consensus builder. And the ironic and interesting thing was watching all of this play out because the 2 parties happened to nominate the 2 characters, John McCain for the Republicans, Barack Obama for the Democrats, who had the best chance to lay claim to the mantle of being problem solvers and consensus builders. But from there, no consensus on the direction. It was a transformational election. Some people want to argue with that. But in reality, 2008 was in fact the same kind of an election that 1932 was, that brought Franklin Roosevelt to power, and 1980 was that brought Ronald Reagan to power. It was a vote for change in all 3 instances and a vote for a different direction in all 3 instances. And more important than anything else, it was the representation of new demographic coalitions in all three instances. Roosevelt brought with him the New Deal coalition that linked the South with liberal Democrats to white ethnics, to labor voters, to liberals, and so on. Ronald Reagan brought a new demographic coalition to power, the so-called Reagan Democrat. And Barack Obama brought with him 4 different distinct demographic groups in record numbers, each of whom voted as if it were their destiny. Hispanics, who had been 4% of 92 million voters in 1992, were 9.2% of 133 million voters by 2008. African Americans that normally vote 90% Democrat in a presidential race voted 95% for Barack Obama and increased their percentage of the total vote by 1 percentage point. A huge African American turnout that went overwhelmingly for Barack Obama. Young people are generally 17 or 18% of the total vote. In presidential elections, they were 19% of the total vote, of a much larger vote, a much larger piece of a much larger pie in 2008. And then there was the so-called creative class. Those who work 32 million strong work in the world of ideas. Those are professionals, academicians, architects, physicians, artists, knowledge workers in general. And they were the ones in particular that made a number of formerly red states, like New Hampshire and North Carolina and Florida and New Mexico and Colorado, turned those into democratic states. And so there were these very, very high expectations. And what happened was, a lot can be said for electing someone who's had experience. And Barack Obama lacked that experience. And he came big on vision and big on consensus building, but he got caught in the meat grinder that's known as Washington, D.C., where no matter how good people are that we send there, not only as president, but also our elected officials in the legislature, Washington is hopelessly hyper-partisan. What we reward voters for in our districts is completely different than how they are rewarded when they get into Washington, D.C. And essentially, starting with his stimulus program, his stimulus project, he turned that over to hyper-partisan Democratic leaders, and they turned it in to a pork barrel bonanza. Arguably, money had to be spent. Arguably, individuals, consumers, voters, we're not spending and won't be spending the way we used to. There's a cultural change that's taken place. Somebody has to spend money to get the economy revved up again. But there was a fundamental disagreement on where that money should be spent. Plenty of blame to go along to both the Democrats, who were hyperpartisan, and as well to the Republicans, who gave no indication whatsoever that they came to play. And that's what made 2009 different from 1933 and different from 1981. Because even though the Republicans in the minority in 1933 swore to fight Franklin Roosevelt tooth and nail, there was a sense that Roosevelt won the election and needed to move forward in a time of crisis. And as much as Tip O'Neill and Dick Gephardt and leaders of Congress disagreed with Ronald Reagan, at the very least what they said was, give the old man enough rope and he'll hang himself. And of course he never did. But what made 2009 different was that there really was an effort on the part of Republicans to delegitimize the results of the 2008 election and to not roll over and to just say no. And it was good politics, because if you looked at the vote in 2008, what you saw clearly was that almost 20% of conservatives voted for Barack Obama. Why? Well, some didn't like Sarah Palin, but others didn't like the war, and most didn't like deficits, record deficits at the time, and most didn't like the direction of the country or the direction of their own party. So how for Republicans to win back these wayward conservatives? Build that base. And the more they built the base, the more they created a counter-reaction on the part of Democrats. And the president, in many ways, though he produced legislation with his majority Congress, did not produce the kind of legislation that the American people felt, that the American people saw as moving forward. You know, Herbert Hoover tried to run in 1932 as it could have been worse, and it didn't work for him. That's one of those things that, don't tell me it could have been worse, tell me how you make it better. And so what we've had throughout this year, and year and a half, is a huge enthusiasm gap. We've had Republican voters and constituency groups saying, I'm ready to vote today. Is it November 2nd? Very high level of enthusiasm and exasperation. And liberal Democrats, and to some degree moderate Democrats, saying, yeah, we voted for change. We did the big thing, and what did it get us? So then we arrive at the health care debate. And the interesting thing is, if you look at most, not all, but if you look at most of the pieces of that health care bill, a majority of Americans support it. What they don't support is the brand. Obamacare does not do well in polls. But coverage for children with pre-existing conditions, coverage for 26-year-olds, majority still support those, but they don't support the entire piece of legislation. And so there's a record of achieving legislation, but not a record of problem solving, and not a record of consensus building, and not a record of change that moves us forward, even if that change was always ill-defined. The president dropped the ball. So where are we at? The Republicans did, in fact, achieve the consolidation of their base. The question that remains, that leads me to the I don't know, is that enough to carry the ball to victory? Yeah, they'll do well, but I still am not sure about the majority in the House, because I look at these races and I poll several of these races throughout the country in the House of Representatives, and I'm seeing polls where Democrats are not doing well in their House races. They're polling 40 or 41 or 42%. But the Republican is polling only 42, 43, 44%. There's still 10, 12, 14% of the voters who are saying, I don't know. And so we don't know if the I don't knows are really going to vote. What we do know is that a lot of those I don't knows don't like the Democrats and don't like the Republicans. The independents oppose Obama. My poll out today has President Obama's job performance rating at 46. Let's look at that a little bit. His job performance rating among independents is in the 30s. But when I look at independents, half of independents are moderates. They give Obama a good job performance rating. But when you take a look at the second half of independents, they tilt 2-to-1 Republican and conservative. And that's where the edge is among independents. But when all is said and done, a large number of independents, almost 1 in 5 of independents, tell us, I don't know who I'm going to vote for, the Democrat or the Republican. That's nationwide, and that's mirrored in a lot of these local races. Democrats are disappointed. Young people have been extremely disappointed. They have gone from being what I call the hopeful global generation to the generation that wants to get started and is having a difficult time getting started. Hispanics, disappointed in the president, but there's no love for the Republicans among Hispanics. The issue is, will Hispanics bother to vote? This is a group, 69% of whom voted for Obama in 2008. These days, 55% say they're going to vote for Obama. And there's a large undecided among them. If there's a large undecided among independents at this stage, they're not going to vote, because they're probably not going to vote Republican. We've seen that before whenever immigration ends up as an issue. There's a sense that the country is headed in the wrong direction. Let's look at the numbers. My polling, NBC poll that just came out, new polls coming out, 57% say the country is headed in the wrong direction or is off on the wrong track. Those are numbers that produce change. On the other hand, when Ronald Reagan took a drubbing in his first congressional elections, as presidents normally do in the first off-year election of a new presidency, Ronald Reagan's approval rating was at 41%. Barack Obama's is at 46%. When Bill Clinton took a drubbing in the 1994 elections, 54 seats were lost. Reagan's were 26 seats lost to his party. Clinton's approval rating was at 42%. Obama's is at 46%. So where do we go from here? Number one, Democrats wanted to run as the party of results. But the problem is, no one felt the positive results. And there's tremendous fear about the negativity of the results. When voters start to hear more and more the term trillion used as a unit of measurement, it's sobering. 13, 14 trillion, beyond sobering, it's dumbfounding. You can't run as party of results that no one feels. Republicans have scored points with their base by holding up a stop sign. But what gives people pause is that holding up a stop sign is a good phase 1 strategy. But it's phase 2. And as Samuel Popkin wrote 25 years ago in The Rational Voter, there are 2 things that voters ask, particularly undecided ones as it gets closer to the election. What have you done for me lately? And what will you do for me next? Republicans have been very good at the bumper sticker war in the past. Democrats always come at you with charts, and Republicans get right into core values. Hearts beats charts, I always say. However, last year, the hearts, the values were easy. Death panel. I don't know what the hell that means, but wow, that's compelling. Socialism. Overspending. Record deficits. Those are bumper stickers. But what's the Republican bumper sticker today? We have found our inner conservative soul. We know we screwed up when we were in power. We know we were just as big at pigs at the trough as the Democrats were. But now we're going to do it. That is not a bumper sticker. That's a big Conrail train. And nobody's going to pay attention to that. And that's why the deal is not entirely closed yet. Republicans have a Tea Party opportunity, and they have a Tea Party problem. The Tea Party opportunity is that's what's giving a rush to Republican enthusiasm today. The Republicans are the party of no, and the Tea Party are conservative, and the Tea Party are not the have-nots. The Tea Party are the new haves. Most Tea Party people earn $75,000 a year or more and are afraid of losing ground, and it's very legitimate. And Republicans are speaking more for the Tea Partyites than anyone else is, and vice versa. What's the Tea Party problem? Tea Party problem is that it tilts, and tomorrow you will hear equal time from my friend Kurt Smith, who is my best friend, one of my best friends in upstate New York, and will give you the Republican side, well, sort of the Republican side of things. But the Tea Party problem is, can they legislate? Can that anger sit down at the table and make compromise and make policy? Kind of reminds me of the story of the 800-pound gorilla that the great scientists of the world decided they were going to teach to play golf. And they worked on him for years. Finally, the big moment, he gets up to the first tee, drives the ball right down the center of the fairway, 420 yards, 2 feet from the cup. Wow. Then he gets up to the green, they hand him a club, and he hits the ball another 420 yards. What I think voters are looking for is the finesse to make the short putt that goes blink. And that's what I think is a Tea Party problem. Do they end up defining the Republican Party, which does mean isolating the Republican Party on the right, which feels good and allows the Republicans to stand for something, but that something may not be a majority? And number two, can they make policy in a world where voters are looking for that plink, the short putt that gets the ball into the cup? So, one thing about the Tea Party that I want to mention to you is that in one of our polls, 17% of Tea Party people told us, 17%, we prefer the party that's anti-Wall Street over the party that's anti-government. And I think it's really kind of interesting. I think that the president ham-handedly went after, quote, big business by charging foreign money, was involved with the Chamber of Commerce. That really sucked. Am I allowed to say that in Texas? Yeah, it didn't work. That's okay in Maine. I know it is. The reality is that the president really should have gone after Wall Street. Now, what's going to happen next week? A lot of those races are close to call. Look, Republicans will win big. They could very well win a majority. I have thought, even including now, that it's way premature to be talking 55, 65 seats. It could happen. It's just that I don't think the evidence is there yet. And traditionally, you know, when incumbents are polling only 40, 41%, Democratic incumbents polling 40 or 41%, that's not good. And normally undecided voters break against the incumbents. On the other hand, there's still no love being expressed for the Republican challengers. Those who are undecided dislike both parties. The other problem that the Republicans face is that we really just don't know who's going to vote. And some of those gaps, that low polling by Democrats, are from Democratic constituencies who are among the disappointed. And we have to see, because we have seen that over the last 3 weeks there's been a narrowing of that disappointment gap as some of those constituencies inch their way back into saying they're going to vote Democrat. So now let's run through the Senate. That's a lot easier to do. Connecticut. Democrat wins Connecticut. I think, is there any press here? Oh, good. You made my, is there any press there? You made my life easier then. Pennsylvania, too close to call. That was a giveaway. That was Arlen Specter's seat for many years, Republican to Democrat to God knows what. Pat Toomey, conservative Republican supported by the Tea Party, had been leading by as much as double digits. That may, in fact, that race is actually tied right now. Florida looks good for the Republican. That is Marco Rubio benefiting from a race that's split. The combined vote, however, beats the conservative Republican, but he gets the most votes. Illinois, the only thing you can say about Illinois is that New Jersey has exported its democracy to Illinois. This is a situation where the candidates are like 39 to 38. Which when you translate it means 22, 23% are undecided, which translated even further means pox on both of your houses. It's going to be a very low voter turnout in Illinois, with the exception, quite possibly, of the city of Chicago. I'm going to give that one to the Democrat. Colorado has been a situation where the Republican has been leading and leading all year long until today. The race is tied in several polls. Barbara Boxer, I think Barbara Boxer wins. Poll has her leading by double digits. I don't believe it, but I do believe that she does win. And in a case of 9 lives plus 1, I think Jerry Brown wins. Which I guess translated means, you know, maybe this country is not as great as we thought. I used to say, if you've got a dream and $1 billion of your own money to spend, you can achieve just about anything, but maybe you can't become governor of California. Nevada. Let's not talk about Nevada. I don't know. I think that Harry Reid pulls that one out, but not by much. Not by much. I think late-breaking Democratic constituencies just barely put him over the top. I miss anything? Wisconsin. Russ Feingold wins that after being behind for a year. That race is tied right now. Momentum on his side. All right, did I go out on a limb enough for you? Okay, thank you very much, Texas and Maine.
John, thank you very much for being with us tonight and sharing those informative and quite provocative comments. So I think
Is the car started outside?
and the bodyguards. Just kidding. We'd like to open the floor to questions right now. I'd like to turn to our guests at UNE for the first 2 questions. I believe they're gathered at the George and Barbara Bush Center there on the campus of the university. So let's turn to UNE and have the first question from that audience. I guess you answer all their questions for them. No questions there? Well, while they're thinking of
Hi,
a
I'm
question,
Brian
we'll-
Duff from the Political Science Department at UNE. Thanks
hi.
for a great and very interesting talk. I was curious to hear a little bit about if you give any thought, as someone who, is such a prominent pollster, to the role that polls have started to play in the elections themselves. I heard a Democratic Party strategist on the radio the other day, and people were saying, yes, Obamacare is not popular, but the individual provisions of the bill are incredibly popular. Why don't candidates talk about it more? And he said, well, we don't do it because healthcare doesn't poll well. And, when I was in my first year of grad school in political science, we learned, public opinion is driven by elites. Elite messages, filter through the media and people hear them. And I just wonder how much sort of by tapping directly into public opinion, unfiltered by the elites, and then elites responding to that, sort of the natural cycle of opinion has gotten distorted by the polls.
I think that's a great question, and I think, frankly, that in many ways we go well beyond elite public opinion. That, in fact, what we do is we go directly to the public voice, to likely voters, and that is as a way of checking elite public opinion. So in that sense, it's better today than it ever was, because so much of the past was determined by a bunch of white guys sitting at the breakfast table at the Mayflower in Washington or at the Waldorf Astoria in New York. And now the pervasive polling at least gives us a sense of crowdsourcing, of taking it to the public and not having the public determine the messages, and certainly not having the public determine the policies. I don't like that, and I don't believe in it. And we elect people, and they're supposed to then carry the ball. But by the same token, you cannot eliminate or rule out the voice of the public. And so here we have opportunities now to do more quickly, more efficiently, more cheaply, more scientifically, what we've always really done, which was to go out and find out what the people are thinking and how the people respond. And now we have the tools actually to not just simply measure one-dimensional questions, are you for it or are you against it, but we can drill down with granularity in terms of phrases. Drill down with granularity in terms of specific messages. That in fact, in terms of a focus group, when I get a call for a focus group and somebody says, I need you to go to Denver, I say, I don't have to go to Denver anymore. I can round up 13 or 14 people to appear on Skype on a Brady Bunch screen in my headquarters, and I can interview them tonight and get you something tomorrow. So I think it's a fascinating world, and I think that we rely and need to rely less and less on elite opinion. I hope that answers your question.
Do we have another question at UNE?
Yes, John, my name is Bob Haggett. I've been a resident in Maine now for 11 years, but prior to that, I was a resident of New Hartford, New York.
Oh, Bob Haggett, Special Medals. How are you?
That's right. I'm fine, John. How are you?
Very good.
It was difficult projecting what's going to happen a week from tomorrow, but would you take a shot at which Republicans do you see throwing their hat in the ring for the 2012 election?
Oh boy, Bob, we don't have time. Okay, we've got the usual folks that are out there. Mitt Romney is there, Mike Huckabee is there, Sarah Palin is out there, Tim Pawlenty, governor of Minnesota, term limited, he's out there as well. Those are the big four. Haley Barbour is another, governor of Mississippi. I didn't comment on the other four because somebody's going to ask me a Sarah Palin question anyway. But I just want to comment on maybe the lesser knowns, because I think the Republican nominee is probably going to be among the lesser knowns. That Haley Barbour has Washington experience, but solid gubernatorial problem-solving experience. Mississippi is growing, and he's one of the only people that emerged from Katrina with a positive reputation. I think Chris Christie is somebody to watch very, very closely. Chris Christie offers the Republicans clarity that very few people offer. He's not as well known out there, but here is a guy, when people say you've got to cut budgets, you've got to reduce spending, this is one guy who's actually doing that or trying to do it, and it's not terribly popular, but it's scoring points for both creativity and success. I think that Mitch Daniels in Indiana is somebody to watch. Here's somebody who is a creature of Washington and left to become governor of his home state in Indiana, and by all accounts doing quite well at the job. And so those are some. I'm sure I missed somebody, but you'll tell me.
We'll turn to our own audience. You have a question, sir?
Yes, sir. Do you have poll numbers for the people in the U.S. that would like to have term limits on the House of Representatives and the Senate?
Yeah, there is a majority. It's not an overwhelming majority, but the last that I looked, it was in the mid to high 50s in terms of term limits. It's time to revisit it. The thing is that it's one of those things that polls well, but has not been high intensity. And my business, in order to understand it, part of it is dealing with frequencies, meaning 60% or 70% or 52%, but a real part of it is dealing with intensities. Is this what's really driving you? Does this matter to a significant pocket of voters, even if it's only 15 or 20%? That's when politicians respond. Part of the difficulty with term limits is that we went through term limits, including self-imposed term limits that, in fact, many of the politicians themselves decided to reverse because they decided, hey, I like this. Now, if you look at a Republican majority next week, there are no less than 4 or 5 committees in the House of Representatives that could be, in fact, chaired by people who are supposed to be term limited. Or let's go to my home state of New York. They imposed term limits about 12 years ago, 13 years ago. And what happened was the entire city council ran for the available New York State Assembly seats, and the New York State Assembly reps ran for the city council because they don't know how to do anything else.
Yes, sir.
My question is on generally jobs, just what your polling might see. 2 parts to it. The first is, what do you think that the people in this country believe is the cause of the loss of jobs in this country? Is it Republicans, Democrats, big business, strong dollar, what have you? And then is there any sort of consensus about what the people believe it would take to start job creation going again?
That's one of those areas, sir, where there is little consensus. Here's what I know, not only in my polling, but polling done by Pew, that if you offer the choice on job creation for the federal government to spend more to create jobs versus reduce spending, our numbers are almost identical. 57% want the federal government to spend money to create jobs versus the 35% who favor reducing spending. That's one of the problems that we've had. The money has been spent, but nobody is seeing the actual jobs being created. And so voters are saying, where is the ROI on this trillions? But from there, I've done a lot of polling on this over the years. On one hand, you have voters who blame outsourcing and immigration and China and so on. And I'm not going to demythologize any of those. That is what people believe. On the other hand, when you offer them the opportunities for local governments to spur the development, or state governments with actual spending to spur the development of what are known as green-collar jobs, then the public really overwhelmingly supports it. So, in short, ideological solutions are not necessarily going to have broad or mass appeal. We don't have consensus on many ideological solutions. What we do have are concepts and values that people have, and if they can see a direct line between that program and the creation of something better, then a majority will support it. That's why I say, and this is very much on a personal level, Barack Obama did things. Money had to be spent. By the same token, you've got David Cameron doing the exact opposite in the UK, and to a large degree, a Chris Christie doing the exact opposite in New Jersey. And for me, as an American, I say, game on. That's what I like to see. Now, sit down, both of you, because what you're trying to do is address the fact that we have serious crises. There's got to be a way that two creative opponents can move the ball forward on this. I'm not running for anything, incidentally.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
What's the impact that cell phones have on your polling? I know there's so much that we've done with landlines before, and now cell phones. And last election, there was a great deal of discrepancy in terms of that. What are your opinions about that?
It is changing us dramatically. So much of how so many of us have had to do business and has changed. I've been in this business 26 years. I remember, just to give you a little context, when I first started, there were two things I heard that I have never heard since those early days. One was, shh, I have a long distance phone call. It's important. They're asking me questions. Gone. The other was, so help me, 1984, 1985, not uncommon to reach women who would say, oh no, you don't want to talk to me. I have to wait till my husband comes home. We don't hear that anymore. We hear, honey, who is it? So, with that said, the cell phones are dramatically altering our business. And that's why we made the decision 12 years ago to begin the path towards online polling. Now, we have a call center, and domestically, 32% of our polling work is done by telephone. There are some jobs that really can't be done online. But by and large, I think we have a good solution that's about 88% there by using online panels and then creating random probability samples of those panels.
Sir?
Last week, we started seeing a lot of very negative, nasty, personal commercials on both parties to some extent. And this week, I think, promises to be lots more, where they don't address the issues at all, but it's all personal attacks. Would you comment on your polling as far as the positive or negative effects that this will have during the last 2 weeks of the election, before the election?
Yeah, I mean, the impact by design is to drive those undecideds away from the polls. If they haven't decided to vote for my guy, let's just make sure that they're not going to vote at all. You know, and that's the sort of thing that's behind the negative campaigning. I must say, when Jefferson's people called Adams his rotundity, and Adams and Hamilton's people called Jefferson a whoremaster and an atheist, going way back. Although our President Clinton found that at least one of those doesn't hurt you in the polls. That's one of those things my wife has told me, don't ever say that again. And but bottom line is, it has always been with us. And what's most troubling to me is that a lot of these people who run for Congress are very good and honorable people, many of whom actually know each other and have worked with each other. And this is the system gone awry when you hire these young consultants who come in and it's all war all the time. And that's the only thing that they know. It's one of the reasons why I try not to get involved in campaigns anymore, because it's so terribly counterproductive, I think. And one of the reasons why when someone is elected, they are then beholden to that party and are rewarded for a whole different set of skills to survive in Washington, D.C., or Austin, or Albany, or Sacramento than they are within their own districts.
Any additional questions? Yes, sir. Hi.
You just talk a little bit on your previous comments about how do you choose people to interview? We get phone calls 1 or 2 a week at our house saying, do a poll, you know, and I usually decline because I thought, well, I don't know who it is.
You're the one.
Do you identify yourself? I'm the one.
You're the one.
Do you identify yourself when you call these people? How do you do it?
And you're the other one. Yes, mostly we do. When the work is confidential in a really a private nature, we don't. And oftentimes that's exactly what it is. It's not the public poll that appears in the newspaper. It's the poll for the client that produces confidential information. We're not obligated to identify ourselves, and I can tell you that the response rate does go down when we don't identify ourselves. To give you some idea, in a nationwide poll, when I first started, response rates were 65% on average. They're at about 18% today. And then if you take a look at the largest metro areas in the country, 6, 7, 8% response rates. That's how difficult the telephone is. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, but I think they may want it for...
Each senator has one vote in the Senate, whether it's a small state or large state. What's the chances of a write-in in Alaska? You didn't comment on that.
Oh, I didn't comment on. You know that Lisa Murkowski and Joe Miller are tied. Interestingly, the Democrat is starting to make gains, but is down quite a bit. Lisa Murkowski is doing quite well, but the burden is getting people to write her name in. You see the advertising, M-U-R-K-O-W-S-K-I, and you know that if there's a misspelling, it could be challenged. So my hunch is it's going to be difficult for her. But the polls at least are showing that she's very, very competitive with Joe Miller.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're running out of time, so I'd like to just turn to our guests at UNE and see if there's one last question from their side.
Lou?
Hi.
Is this on? I had a question. I'm Kevin Canal. I'm just a student here at the university. I was wondering if you had any idea. I've been wondering this for a while, and I don't know if you had an answer. Do you think people respond better to compromise or more of an all or nothing kind of thing? I'm referring to bills, like with the health care bill. Do you think they should have, Obama should have maybe stuck to his guns and had this bill that maybe more people would have been happy or disapproving of? Or do you think the compromise ruined it? I just have an opinion on that.
That's a good question, and really it's two different questions. First of all, in terms of polling on the issue, we have found that it's almost co-equal between those who say stick to your guns and those who say compromise. And that by and large, and I think this is because, well, it's obvious, that the self-identified liberals and self-identified, I should say the self-identified progressives, very liberal, self-identified very conservative, are almost totally unwilling to compromise. On the health care bill, that is such a tough call because had he been able to ram it through, you could make the argument that there would have been the constant, persistent opposition and, the King Barack kinds of photographs and the dictator Barack images and so on, but that it all may have fizzled out by election day. His problem and healthcare's problem is that not enough people are feeling it today. It's not the major issue today. The economy is. And to some degree, it's not as much on the radar screen as Republicans hoped that it would be. But it's not enough of a generator of Democratic enthusiasm that it was supposed to be because of the compromise. Now, that's a complicated answer to a complicated question. Does that help?
No, that does help. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that brings our evening to an end here. I'd like to thank all of you for being with us tonight, as well as thank our guests at the University of New England for joining us. John, thanks again for taking time from your busy schedule. I know this is the height of your season, so to speak, and I appreciate you being here and appreciate all your informative comments, as well as I know the audience appreciates it. Once again, thank you for being with us, and have a good evening.